the question I asked myself when I decided to jump into Myris and to focus on 3D distribution, because my question then was, what happens when everyone can create high fidelity 3D content? What happens next? It's like, oh, need to get it to where it needs to go and retain all of that high fidelity, handle the scale, make sure it's like at a price point where you're not getting crushed on cost.
Hello and welcome to Dream Machines, the show about spatial computing, AI, and how they're converging to reshape our world. I'm Evan Helda, a 10-year spatial computing veteran, and I'm here to learn with you about how to take full advantage of these tools while staying grounded in the real world. Because one thing is certain, as we blur the lines between the physical and the virtual, it's going to challenge our sense of self, reality, and each other. So this show is not just about where this tech is going, it's about where it's taking us. If you enjoy this episode, please be sure to leave us a review and some stars in your favorite podcast player. And for deeper dives on these topics and more, check out our newsletter over at dreammachines.ai. I'd love to have you join our growing community of thinkers, creators, and doers. Hey friends, welcome back to Dream Machines. Today's guest is Will McDonald, co-founder and chief product officer over at Myris, a startup that is rethinking how high-fidelity 3D content gets delivered at scale. Their thesis is that the future of 3D depends entirely on making distribution radically easier. So we talk about why pixel streaming falls short, how Myris uses volumetric data and G-splats instead, and why that matters for everything from e-commerce and gaming to robotics, digital twins, and simulation. Now, Will and I worked together for many years making this industry real over at AWS. So we also spend time diving into our mutual lessons learned, going from big tech to startups and from startups to big tech, and what Amazon's culture gets right and what it gets wrong. So if you care about spatial computing and simulation and digital twins and where the 3D internet is heading, this one's definitely worth your time. So with that, buckle up, enjoy, and I bring you Will McDonald. Will, welcome to Dream Machines. Great to talk to you in this light. We spent many years together at Amazon. I was trying to make spatial a thing. You were trying to make spatial a thing. You were a little more skeptical than I was about the timing of it. But now here you are diving into the spatial industry, trying to democratize access to it in a pretty exciting way. Before we unpack that, I like to start off by blasting the audience, 10 years, say, into the future, and trying to imagine a world in which your solution, Myris, is a wild success. Can you give us a little hint of what that world looks and feels like for users, creators, developers, et cetera?
Absolutely. I'm first very happy to be here. Good to see you again. Yeah. It feels like it was a healthy amount of skepticism on spatial.
Yes, you got to be a healthy skeptic. And
I couldn't have been too skeptical because, as you know, I left Amazon to then go run XR at Unity.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably makes me one of the biggest zealots of spatial and XR there is. So not too skeptical.
True.
But those were fun days back then.
Sure.
I definitely enjoyed working with you. I think, one, like it's so hard to even think about what 10 years in the future looks like when I can barely even think about what this time next year is going to look like.
We're on the curve, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, if you told me, this time last year that I could crack open Claude Code and do an end-to-end application and get pretty much 95% of the way there on even complex applications that I'm building, I would have said, no way, right? Like all this code gen stuff, it's never going to take you all the way there. Now I'm like, I've had the Kool-Aid. I am in there all the time building all sorts of stuff.
That's cool. I could use some pointers in Claude Code, so I might have to bug you offline about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll sit down and I'll nerd out for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's really, speaking of someone that spent a lot of his time in engineering, just as a background, I think this kind of represents one of those few times where I feel like the shift is so large that in many ways it's kind of re-energized me in terms of like being a builder again. And I think that's super exciting, right? So I'll just say that like just as a macro statement, things are moving so fast that I'm just like trying to bin pack in my mind what even like the next few months up to a year looks like. I think as it relates to Myris, the thing that I'm really thinking about building and the thing that I'd love to be true, be it a year from now and certainly 10 years from now, is I want it to just be very, very simple to distribute complex 3D graphics anywhere you need it to be at massive scale. Like that, that's really the problem that I've actually really been trying to solve for a long time. And, I've had fits and starts with it at places like AWS, of course, and then at Unity. And I felt like I need to take a bit of a step back and jump into a smaller company with like-minded folks to really try to just focus on solving this problem. So if I, to your question, kind of close my eyes and think about what success really looks like, it's the ability of just getting 3D content where it needs to be. Like we often talk about why don't we see 3D everywhere? Why is it that when I open up Amazon.com or Etsy or Zillow or what have you, anytime I see 3D content, it's usually like very compartmentalized, requires you to like click around to find it. Like it's never like at the forefront. And the reason why is like, one, it's often very slow to get up and running, depending on what you're using. Two, if it's fast, it's usually just because you've had to make the 3D decimated to the point where it doesn't even really represent what was meant to be visualized. Or it's just too costly to make, right? Like if you think about a Wayfair or an Amazon, millions and millions and millions of products. Well, it's pretty difficult to say, yeah, let me hire an army of people to make all this 3D and then ship that on the web, right? Like it's a scale problem, it's a cost problem, but it's also just like a really big opportunity, right? Because the reality is that when you get 3D in front of people, it drives like a lot more meaningful metrics, a lot more meaningful conversion, like when you talk about retail. So for me, just like as a blanket statement, unlocking the power of 3D at scale is really where I want to see us in the next couple of years. And yeah, I think we're well on our way. Tons of challenges, right? Like, but that's the fun of it, right?
Yeah. And we'll get into some of those challenges in this convo. And I mean, I love the mission you're on. It's the mission I was on the entire time at Amazon. And even prior, when I was at Improbable, we were building these massive virtual simulations. And at Meta, startup Meta, building an AR device that had to be plugged into a beefy GPU in order just to get the right level of fidelity. And we were like, people were walking around getting stuck on the headset, forgetting they were plugged into the, to the machine.
I was one of those people. Yeah.
We've come a long way. So on its face, when you look at Mirrorless, the first thing I think is, it's a streaming service. And I think a lot of people would just assume, this is like a pixel streamer, like what we've seen from Unreal Pixel streaming, or Amazon has game lift streams now. I think Unity had their own streaming service and still does. Can you help us delineate between normal pixel streaming and then what you guys are doing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Because the word streaming is pretty loaded these days, right? And I think most folks, when you say the word streaming, they're normally thinking about video streaming, pixel streaming, right? It's like, hey, Netflix streaming pixels, Teradici streaming pixels, Parsec streaming pixels. That was the Unity one. Yeah. And so that has like a lot of strengths, right? It's like, look, we're not out to replace pixel streaming full stop, right? Like we are not trying to become Netflix 2.0. We're not looking to replace things like desktop streaming. Like pixel streaming is awesome in the right use cases. You and I remember at AWS, we spun up an entire business around pixel streaming, virtual desktops. And it works great, right? But for delivering 3D content, there's a lot of nuance to being able to do it at scale. So let's talk a little bit about just what traditional pixel streaming is made up of. You think of it as, if I want to stream, let's say a piece of 3D content, be that a game or maybe just like some high fidelity 3D assets. Well, in a pixel streaming sort of architecture, what's happening is you're spinning up a GPU cloud instance. You're running the game engine or what have you in the cloud. You're taking the pixel buffers of that and you're just pushing that to the client, right? Pushing that to the user. And you're doing that as fast as possible to keep up the right frame rate. And that by and large works, actually. Like, depending on latency, so long as that you're close enough and you're not in the middle of nowhere, that by and large works. But the problem becomes you need a GPU per user. And yes, of course, like there are cases where you can fractionalize the GPU and all of that, but you need a GPU on the back end. So there's a GPU to user problem. I don't know if you've noticed, Evan, but these GPUs pretty popular these days. I'm sure are a lot of people that want them.
They're sold out everywhere.
If I wanted,
the shelves are empty.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like not easy, right?
Which is unbelievable. Because I remember being at AWS talking at the SVP level, and we were pushing the streaming conversation and the GPU conversations. Like this is like 2020, 2021.
Yeah,
and they were just, we don't need to buy more GPUs. We don't need more GPUs for these. We have enough GPUs for these use cases.
I know.
And now people are getting iced out everywhere and trying to stream because the GPUs get just eaten up by LLMs. But anyway, I digress.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just remember those days where it's like if a pharmaceutical company or an autonomous vehicle company, like one of the like 3 or 4 that existed back then, you could tell when they were doing a massive training run because you just would get iced. All of your GPU asks.
Entire regions go dark.
Yeah, it was just, I do not miss those days waking up and having my customers say, I need to spin up my studio and virtual workstations, but Amazon or whoever else, right? It's not an AWS problem. It's just like, it kind of encapsulates like the whole problem that I'm talking about is like, if you need to use GPUs like quickly for an experience and you need to do that at like consumer scale, that's probably not going to work out well for you. And so what I mean by that as it relates to the problem we're trying to solve is like, if I'll just use an example, let's pretend I'm a car manufacturing company, I'm on the marketing team and I'm building a activation around like a custom car configurator. Right. I want really high fidelity detail. This car is going to be really pricey. So I need to make sure it really comes out looking well, that people can really like understand like what it looks like outside and in. It's like, okay, great. I'm going to spin up GPU instances and I'm going to run this configurator and I'm going to launch it during the Super Bowl or the NBA finals or something. I'm going to drive people to the site. So the problem is, you become a victim of your own success for now all of a sudden, if you've got 1,000, 2,000, 50,000, 100,000, who knows if it becomes viral. Now all of a sudden I'm on the hook to spin up 1,000, 2,000, 100,000 GPU instances. And spoiler alert, they're not there. They don't exist. They are taken up by,
they are there.
Yeah. And even if they were, you sure are going to be paying for it by like
the ass for
quite a bit. Like some of these are on the low end, 80, 90 cents an hour to the upper end, $7, $8 an hour. Right. So like it becomes a cost issue if you can even get there. But it's first and foremost a scale problem. Right. Yeah. So again, not knocking pixel streaming. It's awesome at what it's good at. But when you start talking about like consumer and integrate or like internet level scale, like e-commerce, things where digital twins are having like tons of users like in parallel, viewing something, it just really breaks down. So your original question is like, what makes what we're up to different? And what's different about it is we kind of flip the equation a bit. We're not streaming pixels. We're streaming volumetric data, right? And so we still rely on GPUs, but the trick is that when we take data in to the Myra service, be that 3D and eventually 2D photogrammetry, we're using GPUs at the start to condition that content as a one-time process. And then what comes out the other end is a volumetric representation of that data that's highly optimized to stream. And so when, say, I'm a e-commerce company, or I'm an ArchViz company or what have you, I say, hey, I want thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to look at this content all at the same time. that's not really an issue, right? Because all we're doing is sending the volumetric data without needing to spin up cloud side infrastructure to support it, right? Like it's all just being distributed as part of that one-time process. And so that's
Question on
really the
this.
trick.
So rendering has to happen at some point in a game engine, right, to produce the scene. So is that happening server side?
It kind of is. So what I would tell you is, it's a great question. We're doing a lot of pre-calculation within the cloud to optimize this such that when it comes to the client device, be that a laptop, a mobile device, your
The
desktop,
viewport, whatever that might be.
yeah, your VR device, like that's rasterizing in an efficient way. So you're probably thinking, yeah, like where does the rendering happening? Is it in the cloud? Is it on the client? It's the majority of it is happening on the client side in this case. But we're doing things with the content to allow us to rasterize that very, very efficiently.
And what does
All that has
rasterize
to do
mean?
with like how it's being actually delivered.
So yeah, I'm trying to reach a layman audience that would hear the word rasterize and
Render.
squint their eyebrows.
Yeah. Display.
So display equals rasterize. Okay.
Yeah. You can think of it as like, I have all this 3D content. I'm looking at my phone or my monitor. Like, where is the computation happening that allows me to see that thing? Right.
Yes.
And so like, that's effectively like in computer graphics, you can think of rasterization as effectively like, how am I displaying or rendering said geometry?
Got it. So in this scenario, we are or we're not constrained at all by the GPU capacity on device.
We require a GPU on device, but the thing that we've been focused on is like, how do we get this to render on even low power devices, right? So,
okay. So like a TV, I have a TV. I don't think it's a GPU in my TV, so it wouldn't work there.
If it doesn't have I don't want to say no, because there are ways. But what I would say is like a lot of our focus today, at least, is on traditional like GPU carrying devices.
Like phones, laptops, desktops.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the things that people, minus TVs perhaps. Although we have talked about this internally.
Okay.
So never say never.
I imagine eventually it's like, it's not where there's a GPU, it's anywhere there's a screen.
That's right.
Content to be consumed. So yeah, I imagine
that's
that would be definitely part of the roadmap. So back to the scale conversation, there's the scale equation of number of users. Are there other dimensions of scale where you guys are solving problems like the scale of the scene, scale of the world, where right now, or back in my Amazon days and my current role in the robotic space, people want to use like Omniverse and Isaac Sim to render these massive, huge scale scenes. Are there things you're doing efficiently to help with scene scale too? Yeah,
that's right. In fact, we actually just did a course with NVIDIA and presented a little bit something with them at GTC DC recently. For this reason is, we've been talking with a variety of physical AI and robotics customers, right? And so, well, you're more familiar with this than anyone, I say these days, Evan. But like, like a lot of these robotics customers are trying to figure out how do they feed a huge amount of synthetic data at like really large scale, like multi-kilometer scale, to their GPU clusters so that they can run that through a training and simulation process to kind of continue to make their robots smarter, more efficient, and so on. And so like the only way you can do that really at scale is to have that synthetic data. It's like really hard to imagine a world where it's like, I'm going to build these robots, put them out in the world and gather enough data just by like kind of brute forcing it in that way. That should be part of it. But most robotics companies these days are using a huge amount of synthetic data. And so how does Maris help with like that sort of thing? So this is where kind of the streaming approach really ends up mattering quite a bit, is that if you imagine like a really large warehouse or like a really large outdoor scene, you imagine an autonomous vehicle or a robot having to evaluate that world. Well, that's a lot of data. It's a lot of geometry, a lot of textures, materials, all sorts of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that Maurus can help stream this efficiently such that as a robot, if I'm traversing this world and I continue to like roam down a street, we're able to dynamically load into memory what's needed for the robot to actually process like the right information at the right time, and then evict things from memory that it doesn't need at that time. And a lot of this is due to the fact that we're not streaming frame buffers, and we don't have the necessity of having to keep the entire 3D world in memory at the same time. We can slice and dice this thing up very, very effectively. And the reason why that matters so much is if you imagine customers wanting to run these simulations on GPUs, well, turns out these GPUs have limitations on the amount of VRAM available per GPU. So like the more efficiently you can like bin pack the 3D to be like just the thing that's absolutely necessary at any given time based on what the robot is sensing through one or many sensors, the more efficient you can be in kind of loading up these GPUs. The more efficient you are with the GPUs, the more simulations you can have, right? So like we really help solve that problem in robotics in particular.
This could be a bit in the weeds, but in robotics, there's two use cases I'm aware of. You're kind of mentioning a third use case. The one that is the most obvious is like in the validation phase, right? Where there's not a ton of scale. There's just a few people at the company or at the customer who just want to experience a simulated version of a newly trained foundation model, make sure it can navigate, make sure the robot can do what you trained it to do in the virtual world first. Maybe there's 10 endpoints there. They're all on a desktop. They're just consuming, we'll call it human in the loop. And then there's reinforcement learning where you're doing the training, headless simulations, right?
Yeah.
So there's no human consuming it. There's just visual data, if you will, and sensor data being streamed into a model. And then the third one you're mentioning is more at like runtime with the robot as it's like actively navigating the world and needs like a reference, if you will. For that middle one, for that headless simulation, when you have like 10,000 simulations parallelized, for example, that looks and feels, I imagine, architecturally similar to like, okay, we have 10,000 consumers trying to watch this Super Bowl commercial experience for BMW, as an example. Have you guys seen any of those examples yet? I mean, have you explored the use case of this headless 10,000 parallelized simulation and what that might look and feel?
I think that use case, that use case you're talking about and the one I'm talking about are like very, very close cousins, I would say, right? Like if you imagine, having a real world robot out in the world, but like taking in synthetic data, like the idea of just making that a headless operation is like in many ways one and the same. In fact, like that use case, I think, has come up quite a bit in just like physical AI and robotic customers that we've talked about, is like they have these huge GPU farms, either ones they've built or ones in the cloud. And they just want to be able to run, as you say, like 10,000 plus simulations in parallel. But it comes down to like a lot of that same like RAM bin packing problem is like, how many simulations could I pack into each individual GPU running, right? But like from a Maurus standpoint, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's headless or not. All that really matters is like, are we able to deliver 3D content to whatever the client is doing? And does the client have the capacity to display and render that? Even if like that isn't actually ever being exposed to like a human, it's only being exposed per se to like whatever the farm needs to actually instrument it, measure it, simulate against it, so on.
Is the main pain point you're solving there only this bin packing RAM problem? I guess my initial intuition would be, if we're just doing 10,000 simulations that are in the cloud, we're not really delivering or streaming across some thin pipe to some endpoint that's compute constrained. We're sending it to a bunch of heavy GPUs that are right next door that have the rendering power. And there's not a lot of latency concerns. Am I thinking about that the wrong way though? Like, is there another value prop there for these sort of cloud-based simulations? Because I guess just to reframe it, streaming to me is like you're trying to get the data out of the cloud, But in this case, it's all staying in the cloud. So help me kind of rectify that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. It's a little bit of the dynamic, adaptive nature of what Maris is presenting.
Okay.
Like, I'll kind of give you a bit of an example. Um, like as you say, like if you've got GPUs on site ready to go, like there's really probably not a technical barrier for you to be able to just like load those up with like extremely complex scenes, fully realized and run that, right? The trick becomes, okay, I have, a multi-kilometer sort of scene. I want to run as many simulations as I can of that. So if you imagine like a robot with like, let's just say like a single view sensor, right? It's just like, it's viewing out into the world and that world is synthetic and Maris is streaming that. The idea is that within the GPU, we're only loading in what it needs to see at any given time. So what does that mean? That means now I have enough memory available at any given time to potentially run multiple simulations in parallel. So I think the difference I would tell you is that,
I see.
like, if you just load everything all in one go, like it'd be the difference between running one simulation per GPU to potentially running 20 simulations on the same GPU. So again, it's kind of that bin packing of resources where Maris really helps. That's
interesting.
Yeah, so the adaptive nature is kind of a few different things. Like one example is, hey, based on what you're seeing, you or a sensor is seeing, we're loading like the right things at the right time. And as it maybe like rotates or moves around, we dynamically load the right thing and evict other things to keep the memory tight as possible. The other thing we do that maybe applies more to something like mobile or tablets is we're network adaptive, right?
Okay,
So
I'll that next.
based on if I'm in the middle of nowhere with a robot testing in the desert, it's like, oh, it turns out like a Starlink connection or even like a low grade 4G connection, it will adaptively be able to like load in the content relative to your network conditions, which ends up being important.
That
like
was the biggest blocker during my time at AWS, by the way, was that you go into these companies, they'd be excited about rendering and streaming to any device. And then they quickly realize, oh, we only scale to 100. We can only stream to 2 because our bandwidth is so constrained, limited in these design centers that were built 20 years ago,
No, yeah. We have at Maris, we have a Slack channel dedicated, it's just called Captures. And it features everyone on the team just posting like ridiculous scenarios of where they are to prove that Maris can stream in that location. So
really? That's fun.
Our CTO like made one of him on an airplane, like it looked like he was in the middle seat. Wasn't fun. Crunched between two people, and he's like, streaming like a fairly complex asset, but it loads quite quickly, right?
Over airplane Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's the ultimate proof point right there.
I know, exactly, right? Yeah. Like there are people like posting on their road trips, posting in the middle of nowhere at gas stations, right? Like,
that should that'd be an amazing promotional video of like, if you guys could compile a bunch of highlights, blooper reels of like all these ridiculous settings where Maris is working. That would be an incredible like way to open any customer presentation.
Oh yeah. I feel like the ultimate stress test is like, attempt this to load quickly in like one of the like dungeon rooms at like SIGGRAPH or GTC or any of these conventions where like
that's perfect.
You've got 1 million people all on the same network and it's just crunching it down. That's the stress test right there.
That is it.
We go to a lot of these and it tends to work out. But yeah, it's I do like your blooper reel idea though. We have to do something like that.
Okay, so we've dove into the tech a little bit. Are there any other details about the tech stack that are interesting and noteworthy? There's these 2 adaptive variables, the scene, chunking up the scene in a way. There's a networking element. Are there other variables, other things that you guys are tweaking and fine-tuning to make this really stand out from a technical perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the one thing I'd say is like right now, almost all 3D that people have ever seen is based off of polygons, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we've known and loved for decades, right? Like it's all we've known. And like an interesting thing happened in 2023 where a pretty interesting paper came out, which was kind of the start of the Gaussian splat craze, right? And so now everyone's using it, or at least interested in it. And, we're not, Maris isn't a Gaussian splat company. We're a 3D delivery company. But like as part of being a 3D delivery company, we try to leverage the best possible approaches and techniques to deliver that in a like thoughtful and optimized way. So we're using things like radiance fields and Gaussian splatting and so on. And, we may change that in the future once something else comes about. But I think what makes this really interesting for me, just as someone that's been in the 3D graphics space for a long time at this point, I don't want to say the number of years because it's just going to date me. Now I'll think about it a lot. But for many years, I think this like move into radiance fields and things like Gaussian splatting has presented like a really interesting opportunity in being able to both lower the barrier of entry to like create compelling content. Like, I'm a big fan of like what the World Labs people are doing, right? Like I think they're doing really exciting things. Like putting aside like the end result of what they're pushing out, which I think is pretty compelling. Like the real interesting thing is just lowering the barrier of entry to creating content, right? Like I can give it an image and it takes that as inspiration and then ultimately imagines like a pretty believable world out of that. And it's using Gaussian splatting and it's rendering out on the web. And there are a few other companies doing this also. But like the headline really isn't so much that it's Gaussian splatting. The headline is these tools like this are lowering the barrier of entry for more and more people to create 3D content. And so like if I were to circle back to what got me excited about Maris as an opportunity when I was thinking about what I wanted to really do next and how I get into like some of this new wave of technology coming about, what kind of made it click for me is I have a 10-year-old son, right? Really sharp, way sharper than I was at 10, right?
That's awesome.
And, he's predictably way into tech. And I caught him one day and he's creating 3D models for a game that he's building, right?
So
he's
cool.
building a little game. He's using Scratch and he's using Python and he's kind of dabbling about, which makes the nerd inside me as a dad just so proud.
I'm jealous, honestly. When I was that age, I was super into making websites and geeked out so hard on just basic like HTML, and I can't imagine what I would have done at 10 with all the tools.
I know, right? Can you imagine? Like, sometimes I just stop and think about what if I had these tools back then? But no, I was like doofing away on HTML and Angel Fire sites and like thrilled when I had an animated GIF in there. Which was always like the little animated construction guy because I could never finish the website. But
it's so funny.
But yeah, he's creating like pretty compelling 3D content, but he's doing it by prompting away, right? He's just writing out what he wants. Like they're really interesting companies out there, be it, Stability AI and Meshi, and it's just like, and World Labs, as I mentioned, they're just like dramatically lowering the barrier of entry to create 3D content all the way down to the point where anyone can create 3D content. And I think what dawned on me in that moment is like similar to like democratizing video, right? Like it used to be very hard to create video. And then all of a sudden, like easy to use editing tools came out, webcams, like all this stuff, hardware and software came out that like lowered the barrier of entry. And then that necessitated things like YouTube and Twitch and Kick and like, the list goes on. And I feel like 3D is heading in that direction. And so if I think about the upstream of all these people creating 3D content, well, what does the downstream look like? What does the distribution layer of that look like? And history has kind of shown us that distribution is always a follower to content creation at scale, right? So I thought, well, I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on this area. One, because I've been hitting my head up against it anyway for like years and years. And two, like Gen AI and everything that's coming about around, advances in just computer graphics in general, let alone AI, is just creating this tidal wave of content. How's it going to get to where it needs to be? Right. And so that's what I think makes it a really interesting time to focus on this.
That's great. I love getting your kind of macro thesis. That's going to be one of my next questions. On this topic, there's two innovation levers. What I focused on when I was at AWS was the upstream lever, which is really simplifying the content creation process, simplifying the geometry to be rendered more easily on lighter weight compute. And now we're in a world of just, like you mentioned, going from geometry to these super lightweight data formats coming out of neural radiance fields and G-splats, to the point where you can render a lot of this stuff just on an iPhone or a device. It's like, client-side rendering is way more accessible with things like G-splats. And so I wonder if there's this scary trade-off for you guys where as the tools get better at creating super lightweight, simplified, non-geometric 3D content, that takes away the need to do some really fancy back-end architecture streaming capability. Is that true or false? Or how do you see that kind of evolving, I guess, is a better way to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to just continue to see compression in this area of computer graphics continue to improve, right? Like similar to video, right? Like it took many, many years, but like eventually we got to things like Dash and so on that seems to have hit like the right level of compression, adaptability, and so on. And like, I think there's no doubt that 3D will end up being the same way. It's really just going to come down to scale, number one, like two, how easy is it to like actually get it to a place where it's compressed to a point where you're not giving up fidelity or you're not giving up scale. Yeah, we definitely think about that quite a bit. We're not necessarily in the like codec style compression game. Like we care about compression, but we care about it in the sense of, are we leveraging the best possible techniques possible to keep how we distribute content as efficient as possible? But like certainly, like as we move along, like there's always kind of the question of like, okay, what's good enough, right? Like the difference between loading something in like a millisecond versus 10 milliseconds, it's kind of like, well, who cares? Right? Like it's instant. Like the perception, the human perception of instant is kind of the same at a certain point. I think my view is that and I learned this a little bit having been in the VFX and animation industry, again, for like way too long to mention. But there is like one truth, which is complexity and visual fidelity always marches up and to the right, right? Like no one produces content and says, next time let's make it worse, right? Like it's always like, how do we improve? How do we make it better? James Cameron isn't working on the next Avatar movie thinking, how do I lower complexity? How do I lower visual so on, right? So I believe like particularly for real time, there's still a long way to go to get to a place where we're truly achieving anything close to what I see in like the traditional offline rendering, visual effects and animation world. Yeah. So I guess I'd say like one, to your question, we definitely think about it a lot. Like we'll kind of continue to see as advancements go on that like simple assets, simple like single assets and so on, like it'll just be good enough at a certain point to like download those like the old fashioned way.
Or to be in a browser. I mean, like, 'cause, like I think that's the other innovation curve or levers. How good does WebGL get, right?
Yeah. I've been so happy that WebGPU is now available on all major browsers and outside of the feature flag it's been stuck under, because that's like a really big unlock. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of innovation there. But yeah, like I think that the complexity and visual fidelity will continue to grow, but like as you kind of climb up that curve, like the lower end of that curve, like the good enough will kind of like widen as we move along.
Yeah. Let's pivot to the business side of things.
Mhm.
I'm curious how you guys are thinking about your go-to-market strategy in terms of the right verticals to focus on, the right use cases, the right channels or routes to market. Is there a certain target user you guys are wanting to start with?
Yeah, we've identified a couple of like key verticals we can start with. You know, like anytime you're going after something as like broad as how to distribute 3D content, it's like really easy to like expand to like attempt to boil the ocean and solve all industries at the same time, which is like a very common trap, right? When you're in a startup where you don't have infinite resources and focus really matters. So, you know, coming in, you know, I joined Myris about 10-ish months ago or so. Like, I think the number one thing for me was just like thinking through like what problems do we really solve and how can we really matter to like a key number of verticals and use cases, with the idea that, yeah, like fullness of time, as we used to say, Evan, at Amazon, the fullness of time, people can see waving my hands.
I wrote that so many times in narratives at some point.
Yeah. How many leadership principles can we slip into this podcast? Stay tuned to find out. You know, I think the focus really matters. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time like meeting with customers to really hear about where they were struggling with distributing 3D. And so like a signal that kind of came through loud and clear was particularly in like the e-commerce retail space. You know, right now, a lot of these customers, be it direct sellers or companies that kind of stand in the middle of the like retail sites and the brands, they're all kind of struggling with how do we demonstrate and show 3D content at a scale, price point, and at a high enough fidelity where we're staying true to the brand, right? And so historically, the trade-off has been, with the web in particular, fidelity, right? You're jamming this content into GLTF, which, by the way, like GLTF, like really good standard. Like it was really important that the industry aligned on GLTF. Like we're actually far better off having GLTF than not. So my next series of comments is not a knock on that, only to say that it's time to evaluate other options to kind of take that next step into visual fidelity, right? Like change is good in that way. So, you know, a lot of these brands, configurators, retailers were all struggling with how do they faithfully represent the brands that they're presenting and to, you know, in effect, like get 3D in front of more people, because the treasure at the end of the rainbow for these folks is that anytime you're presenting 3D as an option for a customer, you're seeing 3 to 5x higher conversion rates, right? But in order to do that, you got to spend a lot of time and energy to get the 3D to a level of fidelity and also load quickly enough where you're not churning users out. So like that's really been the pain point that we've been hearing loud and clear from retail customers, is that. And so, you know, we feel like Myris really helps solve that problem in a couple of different ways. Like one, from a fidelity standpoint, now all of a sudden, because we're delivering this radiance field volumetric representation, and because we're able to calculate things like light and shadow and material variance and complexity, the end result of what we're able to show is actually a higher fidelity, or is higher fidelity than what traditional GLTF is able to do, just merely because we just don't have the same constraints that the GLTF standard has.
So you guys,
oh yeah,
the way you render and deploy, there's no need for the customers to worry about or deal with any kind of file formats?
No, it's an entirely different format. Like we really don't think about, like, as a user or as a customer, like what I get from Maris is not a file, right? It's not something I download and then integrate into my site. What I get is in effect an endpoint. And I'm taking that endpoint and I'm using that like in my web application, in my Unity project, in my iOS application, which is really kind of the trick, is that people don't really have to think too deeply about, oh, I'm using this format and now, there are these constraints, and I need to think deeply about that.
Mm.
We really don't want people thinking so much about that because, it's a huge pain. Having been on the other side of it, I kind of know.
Yeah.
And so, like, so long as that there is a Maris integration into the engine that you're using, which again, like things like 3JS, things like Unity Engine, things like Unreal, as long as you have that, Maris is effectively just piping into the applications.
But upstream of Maris, like, so for the person who's creating the scene or the environment in Unity or 3JS, they still have to load in a GLTF or an OBJ into Unity.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, upstream for sure. Yeah. Like, so we align right now on OpenUSD, right? Which is a pretty
I was asking about your thoughts on USD.
Yeah. So, like the expectation is, you're throwing OpenUSD data, which is, of course, like very, very flexible. And then we're taking that, and then out the other side comes the volumetric format. I think as we kind of march towards beta, which we're kind of aiming for the March, April timeframe this year, which will be open beta. Everyone sign up, please. It should be fun. But we're going to evaluate, listen closely to customers about, beyond USD, are there other things that they want Maris to be able to just take in as an endpoint? One of the things we've heard is images and video, right? Yep. Which is, if you look at most Gaussian splat sort of services or workflows, almost all of them are photogrammetry and videogrammetry. It's like, hey, give me this like slate of images that you've taken with your camera around an object, and then it's doing a variety of things of constructing that into a 3D representation, which is really cool. Like, we really believe in that workflow. And so, we intend on supporting that. Not quite for beta, but
that's a use case I suggest you guys focus on. Maybe not out of the gates, but as like a phase 2. We are seeing robotics companies deploy systems in the front lines, and they have good cameras on them capturing all kinds of video and photos. And their customers are like, oh, we want to get some insight into these environments, and we want to use it to build a digital twin. And so we have one robot company coming to us trying to run a Gaussian splatting pipeline from the robot data and then create like an omniverse scene that allows the end user to like search and understand the scene. And there's a level of like semantic understanding what's in that scene. And so there's this world where these robot companies, to give their end users more utility out of their product, they're trying to build kind of digital twin inspection tools. So, that'd be a cool use case to focus on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, why not gaming? That's where there's the biggest scale problem. That's where there's cost challenges. It seems like that would be the biggest TAM to go after. Is there any reason why gaming is or is not a focus?
Yeah, there are a few. And it's funny, having come from Unity, you think I'm just like, okay, gaming first and foremost, right? But and it's not even that, like, there isn't a place for what we're doing in gaming, right? Like, there totally is. I can talk about a few use cases, but like the trick to gaming is that it's in effect non-deterministic, right? Like, you've got physics, you've got players making decisions that are not predictable. You've got things exploding in non-deterministic ways. And so when we talk about our process and radiance fields and Gaussian splatting just at large, right? Like, well beyond Maris, like, one of the things that is still early on Gaussian splatting is like, once it is a splat or radiance field in general, how might you edit or change it after the fact, right? And
it's not interactive.
Yeah, that's right. So like the idea of having a boulder smash into a Gaussian splat car and having that like rip apart and explode and so on.
There's no like
not
3D
a great
mesh there that's
right
going to
now,
have any
right?
mechanics to it.
Yeah, that's right. But you know, like I think, and this has actually come up more on like the robotic simulation side, but it of course applies to games, because what are simulations if anything, like a game being
They're
played
games, yeah.
in many ways,
So
right?
are simulations not really a focus on? You guys are just focused on like static scenes?
Yeah, right now, yeah. But when you think about like a robot and what it's evaluating, like a huge amount of what it's evaluating is static, right? Deterministic, static, not moving. And then you have like other things like cars, things moving about, so on, which of course like need like some physics, need like some randomization, right? But I think like the cool thing that we're discovering is like there's not really a problem with like mixing these things together. So like as an example, way back when I was at Electronic Arts, back when photogrammetry was starting to become big. And the problem with photogrammetry, and in a way it's still kind of like this, although much improved, is like you could do it and you would capture something that looked pretty close to what you were capturing with the camera, but like the mesh and the textures were kind of a mess, right? Like you really couldn't do a whole lot with it. In fact, oftentimes you take these photogrammetry scans and then just use it as reference to build your actual clean model, right? But what we did end up using photogrammetry for back then are things kind of like in the periphery, right? Like an example would be like Need for Speed games. Like when you're driving on that track, everything on the track and some things like near the track have physics, can be interacted with, will change. But then things off the road that you can never get to, all that was like very static, was never going to change, right? And so for those sort of things, like let it rip, right? Like Gaussian splatting would be fine, right? But yeah, like things that need like a high degree or have like a high degree of like non-deterministic physics-based sort of interaction, you know, destruction properties, so on. Yeah, I would still call Gaussian splatting early days on that. But there's a lot of really interesting research. Like I saw NVIDIA at SIGGRAPH this year had a really interesting one of like intermixing physics with splats, which was really cool.
Cool.
So I think you're going to see, again, like fast forward to this time next year, I'll probably see something totally different.
Yeah, we'll have to do an annual refresh because 3D is evolving quite a bit.
Yeah.
So just for my selfish understanding, because like, I would love to bring you guys into some opportunities to have you do that basic, you know, validation use case where we're just running an Isaac Sim simulation and there is some physics and some interactivity and there's things colliding. Can you guys not support that today because you're only doing the G-Splat stuff? Or can you indeed render and stream Unity, Unreal, Omniverse today?
Oh yeah, we can get it into the engines. That's not the problem. And it's actually not even really a problem to say, hey, based on this splat that we're streaming in, like apply a collision shell to this such that physics are effectively acknowledged, right? Like there are ways of doing this. I think what I'm saying is like right now there's like a limit where like if I wanted to say have the robot approach, you know, a crate that is splatted, right? And then take its arm and smash it. Sounds like an evil robot. But you know, smash it like that. Probably what you would probably want to do instead is have that crate be a polygonal mesh. And you'll utilize like traditional physics that way. And that's just like, from my view, like right tool for the job, right? Like there are like some things in the mix
so many
there.
Amazon terms you just can't run away from.
I know, right? Yeah. And they're like, I mean, there's, I wouldn't even like say, I don't want to trivialize it either, because there are like some hidden problems to be solved in there too. It's like if I smash a polygonal crate in an environment that's splatted, how does relighting work, right? Like as these parts split apart, how does shadowing work on the splat? Like there's a lot of really interesting research that we're looking at around that, around like dynamic relighting. So I don't want to trivialize it either, only to say that like, yes, it's all possible to be able to do. But yeah, like there's some nuances there.
Excuse me for being dense here, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. So what if I don't want to do G-splats at all? And I just want to do geometry or, polygon-based scenes with Unreal. You guys can support that today? Or are you guys focused only on the G-splat stuff right now?
Oh yeah, we're dead focused on radiance field splatting.
Okay.
Like we are not distributing like polygonal meshes today. Yeah.
That's super helpful. I this whole time been assuming you guys could and were focused on game engines and some interactivity, but that's a good clarifying point. Okay.
Yeah, the way to think of it is we're able to stream in our volumetric solution to these engines like Unreal, like Unity. So it's not about being able to do that or not. It's
so
more
about a file of a G-splat into Unreal. Now I have this Unreal scene. But then if I wanted to stream that Unreal scene with your scene embedded into it, I guess, I'd have to use pixel streaming in that case?
Yeah, it's like, I'll give you like 2 examples, right? Because there's a fair amount of nuance. It's
totally.
Let's pretend I have a Unreal scene, right? It's like, okay, I want to be able to stream this scene somewhere, right? Like we actually did this with an Omniverse scene recently. It's like pre-existing Omniverse scene, like the big warehouse scene. It's like we want to take this Omniverse scene and we want to stream it, right? Like stream it to an iPad, stream it, what have you. We can take that data, run it through our service, effectively convert that and be able to stream that scene, right?
Oh, okay.
So that's like use case 1. Use case 2.
Okay, so you can't effectively stream Omniverse Unreal scenes. It's just there's a lot of nuance to how it's done.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But then number 2, which I think we've been kind of talking about, is let's say I have an existing Unreal or Unity scene, and it's full of like traditional polygonal stuff. And I have a 3D asset of, let's say, a car, right? And I'm like, oh, I just want to stream in this car to my existing Unity scene, right? Like I want to place it there. Like you can also do that too. So it's like the difference between I want to just take what I have, bundle it up and stream the whole thing to, hey, I actually want to like mix things together. I have some things that are Myris assets, some things that aren't. And I'm saying like both can be true. You can kind of do both given the system.
Super helpful. Sorry for poking at that. I had to get that.
No, it's good to talk about. Yeah, I mean, it's
helpful.
I mean, what's cool is there are like lots of like really interesting use cases, right? Like even in our conversation,
I don't envy you guys having to try to figure out where to focus.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right, we'll zoom out of the technical weeds yet again. Let's talk about this startup experience of yours, and then we'll kind of land the plane with the closing question. A lot of startups is making, having some assumptions, strong beliefs, loosely held, having hypothesis, and then learning and having to react. And this is that famous term people use called OODA loops, which is like that fighter pilot term of observe, orient, decide, and act. I'm curious, what kind of assumptions did you go into Myris with that got blown up, that were wrong, and you had to kind of reshape your view on a thing?
You mentioned one thing, which is I also thought it was pronounced Myris, and it's Myris. So for listeners at home, it's like you've heard my accent. If you've gotten this far, you've heard my accent. So it's like the long vowels, Myris.
All right, so back to the assumptions question. So some either an assumption or a hypothesis you had going in that you had to rewire a bit.
Yeah, I think I was I guess in many ways I was like reminded that there's no magic here, and some things are like still the same, right? Like the speed of light is still the same. We've not cracked this, right? Like data over the wire it still moves the same way. And there's, you can do all the same optimizations and preloading caches and this, that, and the other. But like they're constraints, right? And you're not going to solve for speed of light anytime soon. Well, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like anytime I say that, it's like last year, I'm like, oh, you're not going to see like high fidelity 3D like prompted.
Quantum entanglement 3D delivery.
Yeah, it's just like so wrong. But yeah, like, I mean, if anything, the last couple of years have demonstrated that so many of my assumptions are either like way too conservative on when things will change, or they're like brutally true. And yeah, like things just haven't been solved and may not be solved for a while. I think like the big thing for me is I came into Maris and I was like, right, we've got like a really great set of people who've been in the computer graphics industry for a long while, from folks, from Weta Digital, Unity, Meta, so on, right? Like a really great like a lot of them with a lot of deep media and entertainment space. Like surely we're going to like really focus on media and entertainment. And that has not been true, because while media and entertainment is like a huge opportunity and I'm really excited about it, and we are working with some media and entertainment customers, and we're going to continue to do so. I think I was like really surprised now that I had a chance to like really step back out of like a individual industry and kind of look at holistically just how big of a problem distributing 3D was in all these other industries, be it retail, be it manufacturing, ArchViz, robotics, as we kind of mentioned earlier, like it's kind of a problem everywhere, sometimes in different ways, but it's a problem everywhere. And so I was really struck by that. And it kind of, I remember after like a couple of weeks in Maris, I kind of sat back, like Maris had really been focused on media and entertainment and XR devices, actually. And I was like, wow, in talking with like a lot of customers, my own observations, I was just like very struck by the idea that while like the XR headsets are cool, this is going to sound like I'm skeptical on spatial again, Evan. I'm not. I love it.
I knew it.
But,
see, the truth comes out.
But it's like, I used to like wave my phone in front of people and be like, actually, this is the biggest XR device in the world, right? Like it does AR, right? And like, oh, that's true, And so I was like, yeah, we have like this huge opportunity, like right here in the present where you can't deliver 3D content effectively at scale in browsers and iOS apps, anywhere. Like maybe we need to take a second look at our go-to-market and our focus to like really think through where we can make the biggest impact faster. And once upon establishing that, scale and like grow our GTM into other areas. Right. And so I think like that was surprising to me. Like, I think that like the shift that I think we made, it wasn't like a pivot from what we felt like was important from a technology and product standpoint. Like that hasn't really like meaningfully changed. It's more about the types of use cases and the types of customers we feel like we could really help most. And like, that's really what it's all about, right? Like I could build all this cool tech, but if it's not helping anyone, then it's just kind of cool tech. And I think for us, just, we had a lot of help bringing in a lot of smart people from AWS, like you and I, Evan. Just relentlessly took lots of smart people from AWS. But, like they really helped coming in and helping orient us around a lot of these other opportunities that we felt like were even nearer term and where we could really help folks. So that I think was pretty surprising to me, like how quickly we made that shift. As you remember, right? Like at AWS, like I kind of like spun up that whole media and entertainment, like virtual workstation business and like built some services around it and all that. So like, if anyone should be a zealot around pixel streaming, it's probably me. But I'm just, as I mentioned, like it's great technology and totally has its place, right? Like there are things we're totally not aiming to replace, like desktop streaming, video streaming at large, and so on. But yeah, for like delivering 3D at scale, it just like really does not work.
No. Yeah.
And yeah, it's painful to see folks spin up and like either gasp at their cloud bill or get irritated because they've had like a viral moment and they can actually only serve like a few hundred people in parallel. Not good.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys finally unlocking that bottleneck, because I beat my head against it for far too long. Speaking of Amazon, I'm curious, one of the parts I did enjoy, there are a lot of good things about the culture. I enjoy the narrative writing process. Now my new company, well, first off, almost everyone's Russian, so that's one of my barriers, but I'm trying to get people to read docs and it's not going great. I'm not giving up yet.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's become the only way I know how to like convey my thoughts now. So I do hate PowerPoint. So we'll see how I'm going to adapt. But I'm curious, what parts of Amazon's culture, maybe it's leadership principles, doc writing, things like that have you guys kept at Myris versus things you like we don't want to ever do that again, discard?
Yeah. Always tell people when they ask about my experience at Amazon, like I had like a very positive experience at Amazon on the whole, right? Like, when John Jones plucked me out of my startup, I like came to AWS with like the biggest imposter syndrome you could ever imagine, right? And I just have to say, like, thanks in large part to like John, like coaching me through all of that, like really like one of the best leaders I've ever worked with.
Yeah,
I felt like in that first year I was there was almost like the equivalent of getting an MBA.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like
I leveled up real hard and fast because I had to. It was like adapt or die.
It really was. It really was. So like I'm like deeply grateful for my time there. It's like a very like hard charging culture. I remember John, again, my first hiring manager, when I signed the offer, I remember he called me. He's like, "Oh, great. We got your offer. Congratulations. Well, looking forward to having you come over here. We're going to work you really hard." And I'm like, that was an interesting way of ending that call.
We're going to grind you down
that before.
into powder.
And it turns out John was just being honest. And it was very much that way. But I have to say, like, once I like really like understood how to like really operate within AWS, I have to say, like, it was like really like one of the most like empowering, thrilling sort of positions to be in, like at that time. Like, I'm not sure how it is at AWS now because I've been gone for the last 4 years now, I guess. But back in those days,
it's definitely different, like, for the record.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I have to imagine so. But I was there 2018 to like 2022, and like they were still growing.
I think those were golden years. Like that was
it really
right
was
when they were kind of popping out of escape velocity. And growing out the go-to-market
it felt that way.
Yeah.
It kind of was like, once you kind of figured out how to speak the language and how to get buy-in and like, how to present your case, really, like writing these docs and like being thoughtful. And it almost like, for a time, it kind of felt like you could just like go out and almost figure anything out. Like acquisitions, like I landed my first acquisition there. Never in a million years would you have told me when I first started AWS that I would have been able to do something like that. Because I was just like, what is happening? What is all this? I'm going to drown, right? But, I think for the folks that like, well, one, like you've got to have the right support system in there, like who you're reporting to and like their level of support. Like I had a lot of support coming in like that.
Having good mentors, everything.
Yeah, it really does. And yeah, I mean, like I really enjoyed the people I worked with by and large, like really smart people, really care.
So which parts did you take with you? Like which parts are you preserving? And
yeah, I like, it sounds like very cliche. But like the customer obsession, like working backwards from the
totally.
customer. Like that's just
first principles
true
thinking.
period.
Yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
just like, if you're not doing that, that's not even a cultural norm. Like that's just
exactly.
and it's not that it's only do what the customer says. It's like, it is, as it says, like work backwards from the customer,
customer
like
empathy, like really
understand what's going on and apply your own ideas and creative thinking on like how you might be able to solve that, or maybe even like ways of solving that, and right, like do other things. But like if you're not doing that, it's just, like the number of people that can predict what customers want without talking with them are very, very few, right? Like very, very, and they are out there. Like, of course, Steve Jobs was one of these people. And they're like, maybe a few others that I can count on my hand. Maybe it takes two hands, but not many.
It's different between consumer and enterprise. I think consumer, you can maybe get away with it for certain types of tech where the customer doesn't know what they don't know. But for enterprise, I think it's always true.
And enterprise, it's super hard. Especially in like the sales cycle where they're like asking you to like prove things out, where you just, by like the very nature of the sales cycle, you have to work backwards from that, but
exactly.
So I think that's one.
About doc writing, are you guys writing docs?
Look, I'm going to be honest with you. The only people that read my docs are the other people from AWS. They're just,
so sad.
Like that is like very much
plight then.
Yeah, that's like, I'm not even saying it in like a lamenting way. I'm just like acknowledging that the culture of Maris like is not that way. Like at Unity, back when I was at Unity, there were like quite a number of AWS or Amazon people, and so there actually was like kind of a doc culture there, but like so much of that is leadership led, and so like if you have,
it's gotta be top down.
Yeah, and like Unity's leadership like changed quite a bit while I was there. People come in with like their own mode of operation. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that, like you can't like upward manage culture, I find, right? Like
I'm
pretty
trying
difficult.
that right now at Nebius. Wish me luck. I haven't really pushed hard yet, but my current stance is that if you want to meet with me, or if you want to understand what I'm doing, you're going to read a doc. It could completely backfire, by the way, and I expect it to do so. And I'll adapt, but I'm going to give it an honest try.
Well, I'll be interested in hearing how that goes. I'm in a like pick my spot sort of situation. And of course, like our company's much smaller, right? So like, it's okay to be a little flexible on some of these points. I think like ownership's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Should be for everyone, right? It's like one of those like givens, like you just have to have that to drive fast, which comes with bias for action. Another good one.
I think that's what you realize.
Startups,
is that
so
a lot of them are just true. Like that's why they're so good. That's why Amazon's what it is. It's
I know.
They're just really
it's freaking
like, good principles that like are great DNA to go do hard things.
Yeah, it's like it. I was joking with someone a little ways back. It's like you can't really argue against any of them, right? It's like the only one you like, I felt like the only one that got argued at when I was at Amazon was frugality. Yeah. But it was just like people that are like, oh, I didn't get like the capital I wanted for X thing, and now I'm irritated. Stupid frugality. It's like, well, it really wasn't frugality so much as your idea wasn't really cooked. And so they said no. That's actually the reason.
Yeah.
But like it's like on the face, like all these are just like kind of general good things to do. I think like the trick with things like leadership principles and like all these other companies have like similar sort of things, right? Is like you don't want to use them. You don't want to like weaponize them in a way where you're like attempting to use them to like force an agenda. Cause like that's when things start to get a bit toxic.
They're also all inherently a paradox in a way, or they contradict each other sometimes, right? Like bias for action conflicts with dive deep.
Yep.
As an example. Or what's another one? I'm looking at some of them here, like mean, even are right a lot kind of conflicts with bias for action, because bias for action means you're iterating and you're kind of adapting and you're probably going to be wrong, and that's okay. Or like the have backbone or disagree and commit versus like are right a lot, in a way where like, if you know you're right, you've been right a lot, you kind of want to not disagree and commit. You want to stick to your guns and say,
even have backbone, disagree and commit, like, is a contradiction, like in of itself, like within the same LP.
Yeah, the same LP itself
like,
is contradictory. Yeah, exactly.
It's like argue your point, but also go with it. Right? It's just like, but like, I mean, actually that one, I think for most people is like the one that takes the most time to get right at Amazon, right? Because like a lot of it is feel. It's kind of like you need to like really stand up for your point of view, but then you also need to like understand when it's time to move on and just like make a decision and go. And like a lot of that it does bond to like a little bit of the bias for action, because like ultimately the way you're going to learn most is like getting product out to market or finding out. And if you're just like stuck in doc hell and you're not like making a decision, like no one's really winning, right? Like the worst product is one that never ships, right? And so if you're just stuck, well, there's some exceptions to what I just said, by the way, but by and large, that's true. So yeah, I think it's just a way of like, you don't want to get into like analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Controversial take, I would say. I mean, there's been dilution because, I mean, as Amazon's grown, all of these have gotten watered down a little bit. But the one that's been the most watered down, I think, is probably the have backbone one. People just seem to want to play to get along. I think Amazon used to be a culture where there was like tension was good and argument was good, and debate was good, and challenging was good. And I think I started to see less and less of that as I was leaving.
Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah, I had like some of the like most like intense debates ever in like my life at Amazon. But I think like what I think about I don't really think so much about like the intensity of those discussions. What I actually often think about is like after those, like kind of the shared respect after the fact, where it's just like, wow, like it's just a room of really sharp people.
Yeah.
And we might be on the opposite ends of the spectrum of like where we are on this, but like when I work with these sort of people, even if I like disagree, I guess is the point of the LP, like even if I like disagree, like there's a large part of me that like believes in that other person such that I will make that leap and I'll go with it. And sometimes I win, sometimes other people win.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that shared, like without the shared respect or without like the acknowledgement that like we aren't just doing this because, it's time to like play nice, everyone. So let's just pick one and go. Like that's like really the key to all of it.
Totally.
So,
yeah. I think there's pockets of Amazon where all this stuff still shines for sure. I think it's the whole company's very team dependent is my final takeaway there. So let's come to the closing question. I ask this question of everybody, and I do it not to get an answer, but to get yet another question. And so the question is, as we, back to the beginning of the conversation, how fast things are changing, how different the world's going to be in 5 years, much less 10 years. I'm curious what you think the most important question is that we should be asking ourselves, either individually or as a society, as we face this time of what's going to be pretty extreme change in merging with the digital sphere.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I've actually been thinking about that quite a bit as of late, like I read something and I feel bad. I wish I could like directly quote this person because like I think about this quote a lot. And the least I could do is remember who said it. But, when we think about building things, like namely software, as like a spectrum where, we're defining what we want. We're like learning from customers what they want. We're like doing all these things before we're like really building. Then we're building. And then after the fact, there are things like ops and like making changes and learning more from customers. And it becomes like that cycle post. So like if you think about the start, the middle, and the end, we're in this world now where like that middle is becoming massively compressed. Like it, when I wanted to go build something, I needed to set aside like quite a bit of time to like code, build this stuff, right? By hand, right? Like a lot of time. Maybe I need to go hire people. Maybe I need to go hire a lot of people. Maybe I need to go do X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here to say like those things won't continue to be true. What I am saying though is like getting to like MVPs of product is no longer like something that should take a year. It may not even need to take a month.
Yeah.
It may need to take a couple of days.
Yeah.
If not today, then I think very close in the future, that's going to be true. So what is that going to do? I think Sam Altman had a quote which was, "We're entering the fast fashion era of software." It's like roughly the quote.
Yeah.
He said this like maybe like a year ago or so. And I was like, oh, gross.
That's a good analogy.
Right? Like, as like someone as like a practitioner, I was like, oh, no, can't be. I totally get it now. The thing that's taught me that is actually Claude and not OpenAI or Anthropic and not OpenAI. Although, like in fairness, like I use Codex quite a bit too, and it's great. But like I think there's like some truth to that. But my hope is actually like it's not fast fashion in the sense of low quality. I think what we're actually going to see is like fast fashion, but the fashion is actually quite high quality, and now more people can do it. And that's not an overnight thing. So like, what do we do in a world where all of a sudden people can just start instantaneously building like very personal centric software? So like personal centric meaning like a lot of software we build today is built to be general enough to accommodate the max number of people.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what if it's not? What if now, because anyone can start to build software, they're building things very, very tailored to them, right? Like that's a very new thing. Who's monetizing off of that? What does that business look like, right? Like, I mean, it kind of starts to look like a consumption-based service based off of like a very few set of models. It might look like something else. It's the infrastructure and model organizations that I think probably are going to win out in that sort of scenario. So it's very, very different. Very like, and I would like, I'm very, in a way, very excited about it because it's very new. It's allowing, before I hopped on this call, I was like working on this little personal project just to get my brain rewired, right? Coffee wasn't working. It's like, okay, got to rev myself up for Evan. And like the best way of doing that for me is like build something, right? Like that turns on my brain a little bit.
That's interesting.
Shakes off the cobwebs. I was just building like this very like specific thing for this ancestry research project I was doing.
Oh, cool.
I was able to build in like 15 minutes. Worked great. Made a few changes. Went into the code. Docked with a few things. It's like done. Great. Saves me a ton of time.
Amazing.
And like, there's just like a million things that all of a sudden I can build very, very, very fast. And it's not just me. Like, as I kind of referenced my 10-year-old, like now he can. It's kind of wild. Like building 3D, building applications, just building period, like that barrier of entry is just lowering at such a rapid rate. I'm interested, like excited and interested on where it all goes. Cause I think it's going to, this time next year, I think it's just going to all look wildly different in terms of like the types of companies we see come up, what products look like, who's building them. Yeah, it's exciting times.
Like you said in the beginning, a golden era for builders, and everyone's a builder now.
Yeah.
And so what does that do to ecosystems, to value chains? I mean, back to our favorite quote, over the fullness of time. It's hard to not imagine it all collapsing down to a handful of models, right? If it's going to be as simple as one shot, zero shot, everything in like 20, 30 years, I don't know if any apps exist that aren't just the models producing personalized apps.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure there's going to be a few, but it's kind of scary to be in the software business. That's
Yeah.
why this like infrastructure layer that we're both in, I think is the key place to be playing.
Yeah. I'm finding, in the software engineering world, they're kind of like, it's like going through a cycle of grief or something. It's like,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
it, I think there are folks that are still kind of looking at a lot of this and they're like, no, no, no. It's like generative code's like not good. Like, surely it can't be better than like the 20, 30 years of experience I have. And it's like, well, it's not, you shouldn't really think about it that way. Because number one, like my observation is it is actually it's good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's definitely as good and definitely and almost in all respects better than mine right now. Like I've put in quite a bit of time in this software engineering business. And that's okay because like the trade-off is I can just get all these ideas out of my head and build them really, really fast. Now, can I take some of the things coming out and like scale that to millions of users? Well, like not quite there yet, right? Like this is why it's like when I talk about the spectrum, like the start, the middle, and the end, like the middle is getting compressed, right? But, operationalizing it, making sure it can scale, making business decisions after the fact, listening to customers, like a ton of that will be AI assisted too. But, like that still requires like some human understanding on what's necessary. Like particularly, and you of course know this well, Evan, like go to market and business development and sales. Like that's going to start ending up mattering even more, right? Like now, like that human touch, like deeply understanding customer problems, like that's going to matter like way more than it ever has before.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the main input for guiding these models to go do our bidding, is that sense of reality in the world. It's like we're all being relegated just to like surveillance mechanisms that can interpret, understand, and feed stuff to the models.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agent managers. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way to compress. I mean, you had a bunch of questions in there that were all really good one questions. If I had to compress what you said into one question, it might be something like, what happens when anyone and everyone can easily productize their imagination?
Yep. That's right. Yeah. I mean, and to like circle it back to Maris, it is in a way the question I asked myself when I decided to jump into Maris and to focus on 3D distribution, because my question then was, what happens when everyone can create high fidelity 3D content? What happens next? It's like, oh, need to get it to where it needs to go and retain all of that high fidelity, handle the scale, make sure it's like at a price point where you're not getting crushed on cost. Like all of that needs to be solved. So that feels like what's next. Yeah, like the macro level, like building, nearly anything in the future, like all the implications of like, okay, and what next? Yeah, there's tons of opportunity, I think, for people to like really dig into, where they can jump on the next opportunity next. I think they just, we all just need to kind of stop and think through, like imagine, to your question, like those next couple of years down the line, like what do we feel like is going to be true? Then it's a increasingly hard problem to answer given how fast everything's moving. But certainly a useful exercise to have with yourself. If not every year, probably every month at this point.
Yeah. You're doing annual review monthly now, and
Yeah.
on so many fronts. Well, that's an inspiring place to leave it. Thanks for taking a little more time than we both probably expected. This was a great conversation now. And yeah, 3D is changing so fast. So maybe we could touch base on a more frequent basis to do a little state of the nation of 3D. And where can people follow the Myris journey? And just, I guess, quickly remind the audience of some of the key milestones to look out for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, come visit us on our website, predictably named Myris.com. Easy to find.
Mm-hmm.
That's Myris, not Miris.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we've got an open beta coming up. We're looking at kind of the March, April timeframe, right? Like we'll announce the final date once we've kind of solidified that a bit. But really excited about that. It's going to be open sign up, so anyone can try it out. So we're really looking forward to that. This is the first time we really are going to have Myris like out in the open. We've been working with, choice partners and customers now for a little while, gotten lots of really great feedback that kind of drives our confidence that this will be a good beta. But obviously we're waiting for all of you out there to tell us where we're right and wrong. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Otherwise, we'll kind of be at the variety of computer graphics conferences, industry conferences you might suspect. So
cool.
Follow us on LinkedIn and I keep calling it Twitter X.
Call Twitter stuff.
I'll never be able to stop. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Happy to join anytime for a State of the Union.
Absolutely. Well, all right. We'll see you around soon, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Dream Machines. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing with a friend. And if you happen to have a few seconds, leave us a rating on your favorite podcast player. It's super appreciated and really helps us grow and spread the good word. Oh, don't forget to check out our newsletter over at dreammachines.ai, where you'll find essays and deep dives on companies, founders, and big ideas in this domain. Thanks again for the time. See you on the front lines.